Welcome to another episode of I Am Me with A&P. This is our first episode for 2024. I'm like super excited to introduce our next guest. I have Brian that has been kind enough to come through and have a one-on-one conversation with me on a general overview of mental health. So let's get into it. Brian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Kia ora, ko Brian Bloomhart, Takaringa, Ngā Tamaki Mikado, oho. Kia ora, and thank you for having me on here today.
You're welcome.
I feel very privileged to have the opportunity to speak about mental health because I'm so passionate about it.
And I think that's amazing, and it's something that we don't speak about.
There's still so much stigma around talking about mental health that we don't want to show that sign of weakness. Us blokes, we feel like we've been a bit weak if we talk about soft feelings and emotions, and yet it's part of who we are.
Absolutely, because you have been, so how long have you been talking about mental health?
Oh, I would say now roughly 20 years, 25 years. I worked in the mental health space for many years, but it didn't occur to me till about 20 years ago that I got quite ill with my mental health, and what it made me realise is that the more we talk about stuff, the better. And I recognise that we all have mental health all of our lives, but whether we have good mental health or not so good mental health very much depends on both internal and external factors that can go on. So going through a relationship breakup, going through work issues, health issues, life issues can all add to our anxieties or our stress. And yeah, I've been kind of quite vocal about my own journey to spread normality around talking about mental health.
And that's beautiful. The fact that you have the courage to speak about it to help others is inspiring, right? Because not many people want to talk about an experience that they've had with mental health. And you were just saying that, do you feel like, or do you think that everybody has a bit of mental health?
Well, I think the way I describe it is we all have mental health, but whether we have good or healthy mental health or whether we have an unwell mental health space very much is dependent on how we're reacting and coping with some of those stresses in their lives. So you imagine someone going through a relationship breakup. We've all had them. Well,
oh, definitely.
I've had at least
100%. I've had that. Yes.
And so there's all sorts of situations in those relationship breakups that can cause, feelings of rejection, abandonment, sadness, loss, grief for that relationship, all of those sort of emotions and feelings. You can appreciate why someone may struggle with that journey, because it can be a really trying part of their life. But most people get on with it, find a way through it, rely on friends and family, that whānau support, throw themselves into work, into exercise to sort of get through it and often create a newer and more improved version of themselves. And through that journey, they recognise that they're doing things that will help them maintain good mental health. And some of those key factors of well-being, social connections, exercise, keeping a good diet or good routine, all those factors can help us maintain. So a lot of people get through it subconsciously, not being as affected as other people. But I think the trouble that people have is talking about it is that often it requires showing a bit of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And we're tough people. We're survivors. We get through life. So often showing that sign of weakness or vulnerability can be quite uncomfortable for people to share, but also it can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people to hear. So if someone is showing a bit of vulnerability to them, they often feel a bit uncomfortable with that. And responses like man up, take a concrete pill, oh, you're just going to get through it, plenty more fish in the sea, a lot of those cliches that we're very used to hearing, and they're very bog standard really, aren't they? But they mean it's a response to awkward conversations. So the more we normalise conversations, it can make such a difference where people aren't feeling quite so confronted by hearing someone's innermost thoughts. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. It's crazy because just sitting here and just saying out loud that all of us have mental health, that kind of felt strange for me. because we don't look at we don't look at it at a mental view in terms of it's like a health, right? And so just sitting here and hearing you speak about it, it's even taboo just to say mental health,
It can be very much so.
which
Yeah,
is crazy, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
we can say other things like, man, I'm so healthy, or, but just to hear the mental at the front of health just makes it seem so strange. But I think it's the actual terminology that you're supposed to use. And so it should be something that you should naturally state, right?
Absolutely, and it's factual
Yeah,
terminology as well. It's not emotive. I talk
absolutely.
about my physical health. We have up days and down days.
There you go, physical health. And it sounds fine,
Yeah, we're
quotated.
comfortable talking about that. A rugby player coming off the field with an injury, he's busted an Achilles tendon or something, and there's a lot of conversation around that, when they're going to play again, how they're coping with that injury. But there's very little, very infrequently will they talk about the impact that it might have on that player's mental health, not being able to
Not
perform.
playing, being at home within closed doors, so used to physically moving.
Absolutely. So let's normalize it,
Absolutely, let's normalize it. Like,
or give it the same weight as we do.
well, I think we should give it even more weight because your mindset is huge.
Absolutely. Think of when you've had a late night, for example, and whether it's self-inflicted or there's been a neighbouring party, but you get home at 3 o'clock in the morning, you go to bed, you try and sleep it off, but you wake up the next day and you're generally a bit sort of tender, would be a
Yes.
good way to describe it, no matter whether there's
I've
been
had many
alcohol.
of those. Yes.
Absolutely. Regardless of whether there's been alcohol involved, you're tired. So when you're tired, you're a little bit more irritable, a bit more grumpy, maybe a bit more short-tempered with people around you, until you can catch up on that sleep. So
I guess it's exactly the same as when people are hungry.
yes,
Like they call it hangry
yes,
because they're hungry and angry. So you have to
yeah,
have something to eat and you feel better. And I guess that's a great way to look at it with mental health. You need to put in the effort to really understand it so that you can work on different maybe actions or things that you need to do to get yourself better.
absolutely. And it's okay not to be okay.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love the fact that it's okay not to be okay, and it should be okay not to be okay.
And that's a term we hear a lot in media. We're hearing a lot more messaging around that on the
Well, because like
television.
social media is all about slogans, right?
Yeah,
And if it catches your eye, people are going to consistently want to speak about that same thing.
absolutely. The meme culture that we live in now, and those little sound bites almost that people use to describe feelings or thoughts, or even just describing a good night out, or that was sick. I think I'm showing my age there, because I think
No,
we've got
no,
a
no.
new word
No,
for it now.
we still say that's pretty sick. Like we do say that. We do absolutely still say that. But I
Hello.
don't know if it's like this generation that says sick anymore. But like I love the fact that, you were able to use what you had gone through to come into a space and be vulnerable and be courageous and not feel like people are looking at you any different.
It can be cathartic.
Yeah,
It makes, I think for me, I'm hypersensitive to where my own mental health is sitting now, and I'll do what I can. I know when I need to do different things to help reset or balance some of the other thoughts that might go in,
absolutely.
and yeah, I find that quite. You don't always get it right, and there's times you realise you're not quite as well as you think you are, or that you wish you were, but then you implement some
Well,
strategies.
because you can have triggers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've only got to turn the telly on, and you can get into a real thought spiral watching Al Jazeera, for example, at the moment, with the reporting of Al Gaza, and people can get quite worried about things they cannot control. And how many people do we know that will moan about the traffic, or moan about stuff that they can't really control? It
It's
exists in
when you
our
can't control,
worlds.
right? Everything you can't control can definitely get to some people. Not all
Absolutely.
people, some people.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing. Our physical health is very individual, depending on our lifestyle choices we make, and our mental health is exactly the same. Um, so the different choices we make can affect our mental health, but we're in control of it, and we can make a difference.
Absolutely. Because, there was one thing that keeps staying in my mind, and it's around self harming. right? And everybody has this sense where it means, oh, they want to commit suicide or so forth. But the fact that some people will actually just do it because they're trying to stay alive.
Absolutely. People, from the understanding and the research I've read around self
Yeah,
harm, it's very much a coping strategy that that person has developed. They want to live, but
absolutely.
they might have had some significant trauma of whatever kind that might be. Often childhood trauma can often trigger it for adolescents, um, but it gives them a sense it's something they can control. Creating that physical pain can help create some sensation rather than often being quite numb following a
Well,
trauma.
well, what would you say if, say I came across someone and I noticed that they were self-harming themselves? What would you say that I need to do to help that person?
First of all, listen. Talk to that person without any judgment,
Without any
which is
judgment?
really hard to take judgment out of a conversation when it's someone we care about, whether it's friend, family, whānau.
Absolutely. It's just like how taking the parent out of yourself when it's your child. And that's
Absolutely.
something I've had to learn a lot.
Absolutely. When it's our loved one that's indulging in some kind of behaviour that we might not approve of, if I share that disapproval, then that may potentially clam them up. That might shut them down
And then
from
that's when
talking to
they,
me.
and I've had that happen with my daughters. Like if I'm trying to have a conversation and then I go into mum mode and I don't see what they're actually wanting to talk about and I see what I want to talk about because it's not about you,
It's that person
right? It's about
sharing.
them. So you just got to
Absolutely.
listen. Super important to just listen
Without judgment,
without
not
judgment.
try and fix the problem, but primarily offer support strategies or offer alternative support strategies. Generally, counselling or some kind of talking therapy is a great place for a lot of people to start. Anyone can call 24 hours a day in New Zealand or text. We can call 1737. Not only can you call them 24 hours a day, you can also text them. You can also call them for advice if there's someone in your social group in some capacity that you're concerned about. You can call 1737, outline the situation to them, and they'll give you some top tips to how to approach that situation, maybe approach a conversation, and suggestions they might make to help support that individual to seek help and start talking about what's going on behind that behaviour.
What would you say are some of the things that we could do if we can kind of see someone just not being themselves anymore?
And that you've absolutely nailed it there. If someone's not their usual self, the self that you're used to seeing, their behaviours, the choices, the actions, it could be a sign that they're struggling, that there might be something else going on. It could also mean if it's a teenager that it's just part of that pubescent going through puberty and coming to terms with their new body. But that can also be a challenge. So it's normalizing the conversations that they can feel it's okay to share what thoughts they might have about what's gone on and going on for them in their head, and externalizing those internal thoughts and internal messages is very powerful, because often when you articulate something out loud, you realize how potentially insignificant that problem really is once you've said it out loud to
That
someone.
that's crazy. I've never thought about it that way.
Absolutely. And we all have an inner critical monologue.
Of course.
Carl Rogers, a renowned psychologist and educational theorist, talks about our inner critical monologue. And that inner critical monologue can be really powerful in many ways. It can give us a lot of confidence. It can almost put us into that arrogant space or narcissistic space, but it can also make us struggle with esteem, with self confidence, constantly criticizing or ourselves. Leave that to other people. It's a pretty tough world out there. If other people want to criticize and have the courage to say something to us, that's fine. But often we preempt or
Well,
premeditate.
assumptions, right?
Well,
We have all these stories. It's crazy that you bring that up because I remember watching Brene Brown, and she was actually talking about how sometimes, like, say for instance, you said to me, I was like, "Hi, Brian," and you kind of just didn't even look at me. That moment, I'm making up all these stories. Oh, he hates me. Oh, he doesn't like me. But you could have just been busy, like your mind is somewhere else, and you
absolutely.
didn't hear me. So
Absolutely.
those are examples of us putting stories into our heads instead of just outright asking, Brian, did you hear me? I
Yeah,
just said hello to you. But it's
absolutely.
those simple things that can change the narrative.
Absolutely. And it's about building a more confident, honest communication with people, but in a non-judgmental space so that people can share ideas and opinions without fear of being criticized for the idea. There's a difference if someone has you can have people who are ignorant and who hold court about subjects that they know very little about, maybe through experience or lack of experience. Well, it's not worthless. Someone's come up with a reasoned argument based on their own research, and they can share that confidently in an assertive manner without being aggressive, then it's worth listening to. Because we all have so much to say and so much value. We all are amazing people. Um,
Well, you know what? Let's go back to talk about parents, right? And in terms of
if
like,
we have to.
just in terms of like, if we have to have a conversation with our child as a parent, because like I said, they've come home from school, they're really, really down. How would you say would be a good way to approach it as a parent?
Obviously, it's very situational and
Of course.
contextual,
But just like
but
just like something, just
I
like a
would
starting point,
I
right?
would create a space. Hey, mate, you're not your normal bubbly self. I'm here if you want to talk to me,
And just leave it
and
at
leave
that.
it. Planting the seed, especially
I
with
love that.
teenagers, we they're often a time bomb in their own head, from my experience. Um, they can be charming one moment and awful the next, and vice. But
Vice
they
versa.
it can be you are often walking through eggshells. I know my parents had to do that with me, as most of
Yeah,
our parents did. Um, but I think creating a safe space where conversations that might be confronting can be held about other topics, any kind of topics, means that when those more vulnerable topics or confronting topics come up, people realise it's a safe space, and the teenager, the child, will know, well, actually, my, my mum's not going to judge me, so I can say stuff and I can share some of my thoughts without fear of judgment, because that often is what often holds us back from
for
sharing.
sure. But like, just say for instance a child has gone through their life and now they're in their teenage years and the parents haven't had that open space. Do you feel like there is a chance to change that? And
Totally,
okay,
absolutely, absolutely. I think we can all enhance our communication skill. We're all learning,
absolutely.
and just listening to our children,
I feel
listening
like
to our
that's like one of the key
teenagers,
things I'm hearing is listening. Is just listen.
listening to understand rather than listening to respond. I know that's
Listen
a bit of
to
a
I
cliche.
like that. Listen to understand, don't listen to respond. No, that makes sense. Just really just listen, right?
Absolutely. And any child behavioural therapist will sort of say, well, actually, if you're talking to kids at teenage years, 13 and mature, having that maturity, that having more open, honest conversations and explaining why and rationalising is far more effective than the old school do as I say, don't do. So I'm telling you because I'm the parent, you'll do as you're told. That's fine if someone's under the age of 8. It's a necessity to sort of
But not
set
when they're
that
starting to grow and become an
and
adolescent.
make informed choices and grow and expand their brains and hear all these new
Well, because you
ideas.
eventually want your kids to be able to make those good choices, right?
Absolutely. Becoming their critical thinkers,
Absolutely.
making an informed choice rather than a choice based on peer pressure or what someone on TikTok is suggesting is a good thing to
So common
do.
these days.
Obviously, we're going to go out onto a social media
Yeah,
platform,
for
but I think we're
sure.
saying things that um,
Are going to resonate and be of good,
absolutely,
right?
and it's yeah,
Be of good to others because
absolutely,
you know like I'll be honest, I have few friends that go through a bit of anxiety, so they can't be in like very busy spaces, right? So
yeah,
like going into the shopping center is quite daunting. but then they're able to work within an environment where it's quite social. Is it because they're in a box, so they're in a safe space, which is their workplace?
Often that is the case. For most people, we create that safe space in our work environment. I mean, obviously, a workplace is legally meant to be healthy, non-toxic, non-violent, a safe space for us to go and carry out our jobs. And often, most of us enjoy our jobs, whatever that might look like, whether it's the financial or just the buzz of the colleagues and the family that we create in our workplace. Um, so if that place if that place isn't a comfortable place or happy place, that creates issues as well. Work-related stress is often created through that.
Which
But
is a
back,
common one.
absolutely. But back to it's an unfamiliar environment when you're in a shopping mall, for example, where the crowds, the bustle, the um, I can understand why your friends might get anxious. So
Yeah, for
going
sure.
to a
So
supermarket,
what are some things that they can do for themselves? Not to get rid of the anxiety, but just to help them kind of,
function,
yeah, function. That's the one.
um, remind themselves that they're entitled to be there, just like everyone else. Everyone else is possibly feeling in a similar unsettled vein because it's a busy environment, lots of noise, lots of visual bombardment. Um, you can't control how other people act, but you can control how you respond to their actions. And in a crowded mall, we know how people are. They're
They're very
beelines,
just
they're,
like, yes,
yeah,
move out of my way, I'm coming through.
absolutely. And I think we can all be like that
Oh,
too, depending
totally.
on
I had that day yesterday. So
if
we
I'm
just
in
need to
the
get it
mall,
done.
I'm at
Yeah.
the mission, I'm going there, I know exactly where I'm going, out of my way.
But then I guess that's the same thing that we were speaking about before about assumptions and making up stories in their head. Like everything goes back to your mindset in terms
Yeah,
of you controlling your thoughts.
absolutely. You're in control of how you respond to situations, regardless of how fantastic that situation is or how it might be completely the opposite, very confronting or uncomfortable. You're in charge of the response you have to those. So in that crowded mall example, breathing, focusing on breathing or reminding ourselves to breathe. No one's out to get me.
Is there a certain technique of how you should breathe? Can you count to yourself? Was there like a counting regime, or is it just breathe?
There's all sorts of strategies on mindful breathing. So I'm taking a deep breath and even having a focused exhalation, making room in our lungs for more oxygen. And you can do that very
Okay.
subtly, even as you're roaming around in the mall and window shopping. You can pause, do a big intake and big exhalation.
Yeah, good. Because I guess what I'm trying to do is just like for anyone that comes across this, that they can kind of have some techniques just to help, you know.
Yeah, and most people by the time they become adults find a way through that. They'll have their own little coping strategies. So if I'm seeing someone else who's looking a bit anxious, I'll ask them, what's worked for you in the past when you felt like this? I try and avoid asking other people what I can do to help them, especially if they're in a slightly distressed or agitated state or even just anxious state, because often they're struggling to figure out how they can respond to
Absolutely.
situations, let alone thinking for you. Um, so it's just taking the time, just counting to five, counting to 10, counting backwards from 5 or 10. Um, Anything with numbers or counting things, counting steps on the way to that store to help distract and to focus on being in that present space, I think can help. Tough to hear suicide
Yeah.
statistics and our rates. Our rates have dropped over the last 4 or 5 years.
Good.
There's been quite a significant drop overall. We're still seeing the ratio of 2 to 1 men
So
being the
men is 2 to 1.
twice as likely to kill themselves as men because we don't talk.
Well, like here's the thing: Pacific Islanders and Maldives,
Disproportionately high suicide
which
rates.
is because like for example, my brother, when growing up, I used to always remember my dad being like, men don't cry, men are hard, and I know that he really went through it because of that.
Your brother or your father?
My brother. But
because
my
he had
dad was doing
absorbed
it. But
those
I'm
messaging.
correct. But I'm guessing my dad probably heard it from his dad because it's a cycle, right?
Absolutely. And I believe that part of that, particularly here in New Zealand, comes from when you realised that a lot of our parents' generation were first generation Kiwis. They were born in New Zealand, but from recently arrived families from wherever in the world that was. Because of the geographical isolation New Zealand had, and still has really, the effort people went to get here by boat, from Europe, for example, would take 4 or 5 weeks. They were stuck on a boat, sailing ships, steam engine boats, for weeks at a time. They had to find a way through that journey of often quite terrible weather, then to arrive in a country that was still quite backward compared to often the countries they came to, different from the islands, of course, but in a different way because culturally, very raw country in New
Yeah, for
Zealand.
sure.
Um, so if something went wrong, we had to fix it. If a motor that we imported or some kind of part broke, we'd have to fix it. If we wanted to build a house, we'd use resources around us and build it. We'd figure out how to do it.
Find the solution.
We became Mr. Fix-Its. So there wasn't time often for those early settlers to spend overthinking
Having
things. It was survival,
emotions.
getting on with
Correct.
stuff, feeding
Just
the
get the
farm
job done.
now, get it done and fix it. We've got the leisure now of a lot more time, but we still have that fix it mentality where we'll find a way to fix it. But sometimes we've got to rely on the experts to help fix those problems. And things like therapists and counsellors, they're a great start because they can't fix our problems. But what they will do is translate psychological models and research and theories into little sound bites, if you will, of ways that we can think about how we can change our thought process and change our responses to situations to cope next time, if that occurs.
I know for a fact that my brother did not want to talk to anybody about anything. It was just something that you had to do and that you had to just push through. But not
Yeah.
everyone has that where they can just keep
No,
pushing through and
and
ignoring their feelings.
absolutely not. And people, resilience is a big factor in that. Having that pot of resilience to draw on when times are tough, we get resilience from a lot of those tough challenges. We get through it. Oh, I'm a bit more resilient. And that grows on us. We'll find a way through it. We'll cope with it. Um, and with your brother, absorbing all those messaging, both consciously and subconsciously as a young person, can be a real challenge. And I think I went through a
Yeah.
situation where being emotionally authentic was definitely frowned upon when I was a little boy. You didn't show emotions. You
That's how
turned the
my
other cheek.
agreed. And my brother was exactly the same because I remember him having a moment with me where he was just like, sis, you have no idea how hard this is.
It's hard being tough.
It is really hard.
Yeah.
And
And pretending to be tough is often
absolutely,
takes a lot more energy than just being genuine in
I've
our
been there.
space.
I've felt that way for sure. For
Yeah,
sure. It does, it tugs. It really does tug. But then you
yeah.
have to find ways to try and work through it. So, I like to journal.
That's a great way.
Yeah,
A great way of reflecting on days and reflecting on moments, both the joys of the day and maybe some of the down points, but you're getting it out onto a
that's it.
piece of paper.
And writing gratefuls every single morning.
I hear you.
I
So
live by it. I full heartedly recommend it for anybody and everybody. That just to write what you're grateful for instantly takes away the worries of the day.
absolutely, and I don't even write it down because I'm lazy.
But you can speak
And
about it.
tell them to
Exactly.
myself. I tell them to other
Absolutely.
people. I might even just have an initial thought, an internal thought, but focusing on the positives rather than often being overwhelmed by all the negative factors in our lives. There's always some kind of positive. The fact we're alive and breathing and able to communicate.
Absolutely. We have clothes to wear,
Houses,
a job,
vehicles, We moan about the traffic, and yet
The
we have
fact that
roads to
the
drive
fact
on.
that you're able to wear glasses to see, where some people
Absolutely.
don't even have that.
And that's a
You
great
know?
analogy too.
Yeah,
I need
absolutely.
glasses to see properly,
That's
and now
it.
I
But
need
can
them
you
to
imagine
drive.
like places that are just people just can't afford them or don't have
Absolutely.
the access to it?
Yeah.
You will never
I've got
have
to
a
be
clear
grateful for that.
vision.
But I'm also grateful when you think about glasses that someone has been able to put together the technologies to
Technology to be
create
able to
a
visually
tool to help
see.
me see. So there's a lot of tools we can use in a similar vein to help maintain good mental health. But how often do we let a few things slide? Or how often are we focused on that? We go off to the gym every day. A lot of people go to the gym every day to balance their
I go to
physical
the gym for
health.
mental health.
And it can absolutely, you're
That's the
getting those
purpose I go for
endorphins
it.
up.
Absolutely.
You look in the mirror and
I
you
mean, I guess it's a win when you look in the mirror and what you're seeing is you're starting
absolutely,
to see progress, of course.
absolutely.
Of
And then
course.
the diet to maintain that gym, the routine of sleep so that you have the energy to be able to go to the gym. Those are quite simple factors, but often we take them for granted.
I feel like everyone takes sleep for granted.
Absolutely.
They say that if you sleep early, you become younger. Apparently, some of the things that I hear, but
I'm going to bed now.
they just say that it's just good to have a good night's sleep to refresh the mind and the body.
Absolutely. For everything in our brain to do with the filing, our
Correct.
blood, our oxygen
Because everything
levels,
needs to
everything just needs
regenerate.
to. Absolutely. So the same principle applies for mental health too. Giving us that time, giving that sleep, that resting our brains, that we can avoid overcomplicating our brain with too many thoughts and too many self thoughts that are often based on those
Well, it is
assumptions.
the self thoughts, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What are some of the things you do for yourself to just control your thoughts? What are some of the things when you're going through like you have a million things happening and then you're just like, okay, I need to control this moment.
I stop. Sometimes I might just go and have a lie down or a nap for half an
Okay.
hour. Other times I might go for a walk. I might cook something. I might bake something. I like to cook and bake, so
Walk your dog.
I walk my dog when I had a dog. She's
Yes.
now dead, sadly. Um, there's all sorts of things we can do. I can just pick up a book and read something. I've got a lot of books that are non-fiction, so I'm learning something new. I might just do a crossword, depending on my physical ability and how energetic I'm feeling. I might go for a run, a bike ride, a walk. I might pick up the phone one of my relations, phone someone I think's going to be home. What are you up to? I've got a minute for a chat. Texting people, making the
So
effort
just
to connect
making
with
an effort to
people.
do something, right? Not
Yes,
just sit in those thoughts.
no, easier said than done
100%,
sometimes.
I agree.
Um,
But that's why I'm
our
asking
busy
you.
lives often we don't take enough time for ourselves. We're absorbed by work issues, family issues, life issues, juggling paying taxi service for our
You know, it's
kids.
quite interesting that you talk about time because before I used to be that person that was like, I just don't have the time. But you know what? When you make time a priority for yourself, you find the time. And I've found that I find the time for myself. I find the time to be grateful. I find the time to be able to go for walks. I find the time to have those conversations with my family because if it's truly a priority, you will find a time.
Absolutely, and we make the time to go to the gym to look after our physical
That's it.
body. Let's give it the same amount of time for our
Agree.
brain.
So, yes, you do have time for your mental health. 100%. You always have time to look after your mental health.
And if you can't look after your own mental health, you're not going to be as effective trying to help other people. I like to think of it as a bit of a broken arm analogy,
Yeah.
if you will. If someone comes to you and their arm's broken, you can see it. It might be wobbly. It might be at an unfunny angle. Are you going to go, well, suck it up, buttercup? Or
Yeah.
are you going to be more compassionate and realistic? That arm needs someone to look at it. I'll get you to the ED. I'll get the X-ray specialist. But essentially, you might just get someone to the ED with a broken arm. You're not going to bother worrying about contacting the X-ray specialist, the bandager, the plasterer,
Not
the
at all.
orthopedic surgeon, the radiographer to read the X-rays. The tea lady's going to bring you a cup of tea while you're waiting. You're not going to make all those appointments. You're just going to get that person to the A&E.
So that they can get help as soon as possible.
Absolutely. So if someone's been crying all the time, having really low moods for a few weeks, disconnecting with people, disconnecting with others, withdrawing from activities, not being so motivated, the tone of their voice changing, not looking after themselves so much, it could be a sign that they've got the equivalent of a broken arm with their mental health. Would you just tell them to suck it up and brush it off?
Absolutely not.
Or would you get them to reach out? And even if that 1737 number you talked about earlier, if they called them, it might be that that person's just having a bad day. But just talking to someone honestly and openly in a non-biased way, because counsellors give us an unbiased perspective on what's going on in our head. So talking to them can be really beneficial. And if that person came to you 3 weeks later and still with their arm all cocked, as it were, would you say, oh, well, don't worry, suck it up? Or would you really reinforce the same
I would
message
take
you'd
them
sent?
straight
You'd
away.
take them there.
I
You'd
would
make sure
absolutely.
you get
And
them there.
I guess that's just another way of saying, as you all know, we have the 1737 number you could text or call. If you are sitting with someone and you don't feel that they're going to do it, we can make that call for them and sit with them if they're comfortable.
Yeah.
Is that not correct?
Yeah, we can help them. We can put it on speakerphone and say, look, I'm calling my friends a bit emotional at the moment. Can you give us a few top tips? You might withdraw and let that person take over and share some of their innermost thoughts. Why wouldn't you? You'd do the same if you went for an X-ray at A&E for that broken arm.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't hesitate. And for a younger person, of course, or where you've got parental responsibility, you wouldn't hesitate. Often one of the hardest things for mental health is that people have to accept that there might be something going not quite well for them.
Yeah.
There's a really good video I saw a few years ago, if you don't mind me sharing it.
No, go for it.
One produced by I think it's the World Health Organization, and it's called The Black Dog. And it's a video about depression. But the imagery they use of a black dog, and they've used the term for the black dog has been used to define or to describe mental health conditions for over 4,000 years. There was a Greek philosopher, an ancient Greek philosopher, who coined the term. Winston Churchill used it as well. But this video, I've watched it a few times and I've shared it a lot of times with other people I know, whether in my social group or friends group, who want to know what this depression is all about. This video sums it up in a nice, neat little 3 or 4 minute video.
It's called Black Dog.
Black Dog.
And you can find it on YouTube?
Yes, you can. And it's a great little video to help people understand what depression might be for that person.
I will put
going
this
through it.
in the bottom part of this chat so that you guys will be able to go have a look at this. If it's that good, then it's something that needs to be watched.
I'd recommend it purely because I've often shown it to, I mean, I'm over 50, as you probably guessed, but...
No, I thought I wouldn't think so. I thought you were like maybe 25.
Okay, you having some kind of psychotic break, girl? Okay, 3, 2, 1, you're back in the room.
I'm back.
I had a friend several years ago. I have a friend, I've known him for most of my adult life. He's an Aucklander, born and bred, but of course I sort of keep in touch with him when I was in England and visiting my family. At the end of the last lockdown, this friend of mine turned 70 in that lockdown, so no big celebration. There's a bit of he likes a few drinks, would be fair to say. He lost his mother, who was at the ripe old age of about 99, 3 or 4 other elderly relations, all in the community, the East Cape of New Zealand, where he's from originally. Because of the lockdown, he wasn't able to go down and contribute to the tangi or the whole
That's really
grief.
sad.
And that was tragic. And he lives on his own. He also retired finally in that lockdown. He started to feel a bit low, so he went off to the doctor. The doctor prescribed him antidepressants and referred him to because he's over 70 now, the geriatric mental health services. And I caught up with him before he went for the appointment, and it was clear he wasn't well from my background
Of
and
course, you
observation.
could identify what was going
His
on.
demeanour, his posture, the words he used were very self-deprecating and very muted. Wasn't the
So what
bubbly
was he saying?
person.
What kind of words was he saying?
He was. He just felt really low. What's the point?
Okay,
What's the point? And I don't think at that point in time he felt suicidal. However, he made a little bit of a mistake. He made it a bit harder for himself because with most antidepressants, alcohol, and in fact most mental health condition, it's not
you're
considered
not
great
supposed
to
to
have
mix,
alcohol.
correct?
But if you like a few glasses of wine on a Friday or Saturday, and as he did, catching up with friends and his cronies, he had a good sort of connection circle, you still go in that routine. However, because of the alcohol he was taking and the antidepressants, it created a real chemical imbalance in his head, and he went into what we call a psychotic episode, and his turned out to be quite a lengthy period of time. He described himself as a mess. And because of this, when I knew he was going to this appointment, I said, look, I'll take you. I knew he doesn't drive, so I thought I'll be helpful. And I could also advocate at that meeting. So I went with him with his consent. I picked him up. I had to prompt him like a 2-year-old how to get dressed, how to put his clothes on. Confidence. I think I've got to turn the oven off, but I'm not sure. It was very, there
Wow,
was so much
forgetful.
uncertainty. All these basic functions that he was quite comfortable and competent to do had left him, and he was in a mess. I sat in on the meeting with the mental health team, and they were awesome. They each sort of asked questions to gather their information. They were trying to ascertain essentially the level of his unwellness. Um, and after hearing a little bit, they ended up asking him, actually, have you thought about killing yourself? And he, much to my surprise, said yes. And I was a bit shocked because I thought he knew me well enough to share those innermost thoughts. But then he did say to me at that moment, please don't tell anybody, Brian. I said, well, we're in a safe place
Of
here, and this
course.
is the right team to share that comment with. It turned out that he, because of the alcohol, it had triggered far more negative emotions in his head than he would have had if he'd just stuck to the antidepressants. So he ended up being put into a rest home for a few weeks, where they could make sure he was fed because he hadn't been feeding himself very well. Um, he was off the alcohol while he was there. He was also on some quite hard pill to help balance the cravings for alcohol and the antidepressants. And he came round for a few weeks. He sort of improved, and then he got news about a good mate of his in Auckland that died.
Mm.
So he had got a little bit better, and this happened. He ended up having to be put into the secure unit at the Auckland Hospital for the mental health services for a period of about 3 months, while he had significant treatment, both physical and mental, to help him recover. One of the toughest things that we went through with my friends of journey was the attitude of his cronies, his friendship circle. Well, I've had a tough life, and can get through it.
Yes.
He's got to get through it. He's just got to toughen up,
The
wake up and
judgment
get through it, get
and the
over it, and
opinions.
all these opinions,
It's
but it
terrible.
was this old school mentality, and I played them that Black Dog video. The humility and the humbleness and the compassion and the kindness towards their friend changed tenfold almost in the moment of that video. That's how powerful the video is.
I think I've watched it.
It's well worth looking at if you haven't seen it. I'm sure you've probably seen it
Yes, I
over the
have. Yes, I know
times.
what you're talking about, and it's you're 100% right. That is such a great video.
Well, it can be. I think what a lot of people realise when they see films or see or start talking to people or start to have that awakening around their own mental health, they realise actually there's probably been some times in my life in the past that I've felt a bit low, or even might have had a little bit of depression for a few weeks because of the circumstances. Often that can help motivate us, and it's a great distraction sometimes from our own. When we talk about mental health here in New Zealand, if we can talk about suicide figures or general stats in it for a moment, um, the biggest age group here in New Zealand that kills themselves is the 18 to 25 or 20 to 25-year-old age group. They're the most likely to kill themselves than any other age group. 50 to 59-year-olds is the second highest age group, which
Is that because the 20 to 25 is when you're just coming out of school and you're trying to find yourself, and then
figure
50,
out who you were when you're that 18 to
correct,
25-year-old age group, you're trying to figure out who you are.
and then the 54 to 59 is because you're kind of at a standstill.
Absolutely. And let's talk about the 18 to 25
Yeah,
a bit
let's do
more,
this.
because that
Absolutely.
transition most 18-year-olds have from being being a dependent individual with banker mum and dad, safe house, all those other things, generally speaking, they have that transition to becoming an adult, an independent person, making choices that they have to deal with the consequences, whether it's academic routes, work routes, what kind of job they might do. A lot of those choices we make at that age group, we live with for the rest of our lives. Finding that mate, trying to get some financial security or stability, to save, to aspire to the dreams they have. That can be a real challenge. What I think often that age group lack a bit more of that us older generations have acquired is something called resilience. They may not have had so many tough times to help build that resilience that helps navigate some of those situations more effectively when they're that age group. We know our brain doesn't stop growing until we're about 25. There's chemicals just finalising and settling in. But it's a tough period of time for a lot of people. And it's a tough world we live in. The the keeping up with the Jones effect, the images that they get from
Absolutely.
across the world, how people are being successful, what their success
Well,
is, the
comparison.
confidence.
Comparison
We
comes in,
compare
right? Yeah,
ourselves
which
to
is
other
really
people and
bad.
think, well, why haven't I got what they've got?
Correct.
So I think that's the key. Those are the key factors in that age group. It's a tough time figuring out who we are. Is often a real struggle when you think of the whole diversity of gender identity, sexuality identity. When I was a young person, it was very binary. Now it's very fluid and very diverse, which is great. People can be who they want. But just because the laws have changed,
Doesn't
or
mean that people still don't go through those moments.
absolutely,
Or absolutely. And of course, especially when we all come from different cultures and
yes,
they will all be looked at a different point of view. Like it's
and the
all,
values and beliefs we
that's it.
acquire can make such a difference
Then
in
it
each
comes
and
in,
every one.
it's just so much bigger than us, right? Because then there's
Yeah,
religion and then, yeah, just
so many layers
so
of
many
what creates
layers
us.
for sure.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to be able to just ask someone, are you okay?
Yeah, and be prepared to listen to their
Yeah.
response, to hear their response and understand their response rather than respond to their response.
Because, honestly, I like to do it to anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will do it. If I see someone I come across and they kind of look sad, I'll be like, "Are you okay?
You okay? How are you
How are
doing?
you?" Like,
What
and
have you been up to? What's going on for you?
well, like, I've heard those stories where people have just had someone ask them, "Are you okay?" and they've felt seen, and it's made them
Yes.
not want to go any further because they've
Yeah.
realized someone does notice me. Someone
I'm
does
not
see me. I'm
invisible.
not invisible.
Yeah. We
And
live in a busy world. I often hear people talk about their feeling of lack of visibility. And I think that ties into the 50 to 59-year-old suicide rates and some of the key contributing factors for that age group, because they might be divorced, the kids are left home, they're living on their own, less opportunity to build social connection, there might be more health issues, retirement's coming around the corner, if we've got enough money saved up,
finance,
if we've got elderly parents that are demanding us, our kids still want to get bank of mum and dad, all sorts of factors. So it can make it really challenging for that
man, just
age.
listening to you say it makes me feel a bit daunted.
It's fine.
I'm like, oh my goodness. No, for sure. As parents, it's really hard for you to let go sometimes. And that can cause some mental health issues again.
Absolutely. Even when we see a lot of parents now, we regard the world as a bit of a dangerous place to live, so we try and protect our kids from some of the struggles we might have gone through.
But
But some of
sometimes you got
those
to let them
struggles,
walk their walk.
absolutely,
You know,
it's okay to make a mistake. We learn
correct.
by our mistakes. I've learned more by all my mistakes than going off and having an easy life. Um, yeah, that's a whole, that's a
That's
2 hour
a whole
interview,
nother
and that's like,
story.
pack a sleeping bag for that one.
No, I love that.
But we all find our way, and we can help other people find their way just by taking the time to make that person feel valued, asking them how you're doing, telling people we care about them, we're concerned about them, that we love them. Even telling people we love them can be
You
quite a
know,
challenge.
it's interesting you say that because within the Pacific Island families, saying I love you isn't exactly the most normal thing. Well, what I've come across growing up, right? But I've normalized it with my kids. So we say I love you 24/7, right? But it's crazy because with my mum, we didn't used to say it because it's just so weird. But now we do say I love you because it's just something that
It
just flows.
reinforces it.
Yeah.
Often, often it's assumed that, oh, well, they love me.
But yeah, for
And we're
sure.
just going to rely on that assumption. But it's nice having it
It
reinforced and
is nice.
reaffirmed.
It is nice.
And
It is nice to be loved.
it's lovely to be loved. And
It's
it's easy to love yourself if you're loved, but you can't love other people, and you can't expect other people to love you
correct.
unless you love yourself.
Well, I definitely love myself. Only because I know I need to give myself just as much love because I'm giving it
As
to
you're giving it
others,
to others,
right?
absolutely. We're really kind to other people. Let's be kind
There's
to
a
ourselves.
100%, and I love being kind
Yeah.
to myself.
And and I'm going to pick up on your comment about the Pacifica community
Yeah,
that you were.
definitely.
I mean,
That's awesome.
obviously I am not Pacifica, but I have connections
Of
in the
course.
community, and I had a relationship with someone in that community for a few years, so I had an insight. Um, and often I sort of come across people from the Pacifica, the Maori community, from often lots of ethnic communities, and they say to me, Brian, my culture, we don't like talking about mental health. It's not considered culturally appropriate. It's not considered culturally normal. It's considered confronting. It's something, it's taboo.
It's taboo.
And my response, I've kind of gone over the years, and it's a bit confronting for that person to hear, is there's 170 different cultures here in Auckland. We're a melting pot. We're very cosmopolitan now. We're the biggest Pacific Island city in the world. No culture is comfortable talking about mental health. So let's see it as a reason to talk about mental health rather than an excuse not to. I know that's quite a
No, that's good.
challenge I've set down there, but the more we talk on the normal conversations, and it means it can slow
Well,
down that
because
journey of,
it is
is
normal.
yes,
It is normal.
absolutely.
That's the sad thing about it, is the fact that we have to state normal when it is normal
Can
to,
I ask you a
of
question? I know you're
course.
the interviewer today, but
No, absolutely.
have you ever broken a bone?
No. Oh, my husband broke his arm. Yes. Okay.
So since you've been married as adults, so was he working at the time?
Yes, he was.
So did he? How did he drive to work?
He, oh my goodness, he actually couldn't.
So someone had to pick him up, maybe
Correct.
one of the other
I
lads,
did.
or you had to drive him. How did he shower?
We had to wrap his arm with like plastic
Rubber
bag
band on
and
the
rubber
top.
banded, and then
Yeah. How did he do some of the chores around the house? The gardening, the
well, he couldn't
cooking.
really because it was his right arm, it was his main arm, so I had to do everything.
You had to do everything for him.
Correct.
Did he get frustrated?
Yes.
Did he curse? Did he swear when he
Yes.
couldn't open a jar of pickles? Or
Totally.
yeah.
Just the simplicity of life, right? Doing the simple things.
So it's fair to say that he had a physical injury, but that physical injury had a negative impact on his mental health.
Correct.
How many people, friends, family, yourselves, had discussions around how the harm was healing, how it was itching inside the
Nobody
cast?
did.
Everyone talked about his arm and the physical injury,
The physical injury, totally, and the itching, yes,
and the itching and the smell
the
when you
smell,
all those things people talk about. Is it
not the
how
vibe.
is it been X-rayed? Is it repairing well? Oh, you know, it's going to be a little weedy when it comes out the cast. All those
Yeah, and it's
conversations
just
we
so
have.
small as well,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
and the colour. I know this because I broke my left many years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
Most of us have conversations with this massive flag saying I'm unwell. But most people, it's fair to say, don't probe anymore about the impact that break is having on that person's mental health, the frustration you talked about, the cursing, not being able to function, not being able to live his best life
Do you
for
think
that period of
do
time.
you think it's because we're so used to blocking out the negative? Where people look at it as being a negative when really it's not. It's just
It's that
the
taboo,
frustration,
it's
right?
that tabooness,
Yeah.
or the lack of knowledge, and I don't mean, yeah, the lack of knowledge or understanding that actually it's a no-brainer almost, isn't it? That it's obvious that if someone's not able to carry out their version of their life because stuff that's going on, that it could have an impact on their mental health.
You know what? You've actually just pinged something in my mindset. Because, like we were talking about, Pacific Islanders don't like to speak about mental health. But I think, like, what parents don't understand is that if you embrace it, your child will, I feel, this is my point of view, will become more successful because they will have a better understanding of understanding their mind and being able to speak about things that aren't meant to be spoken about, which gives you strength to be able to be successful because it gives you a voice to stand your ground.
And owning our mental health and going,
Yeah.
actually, I'm not great today, but this is what I'm going to do to fix it. And saying the only person that can fix it is me, sometimes with support from others, of course, family, friends. I think
Resilience comes in.
absolutely. But even I think most people feel better after just having a conversation with someone. You said,
You know what? Absolutely. I a
having a
100%
vent, a
concur on
rant, a
that.
bleat. But at some point, we get a different perspective. We go to a friend and sort of bleat about something that's gone on at home or at work. They give us a different perspective based on their understanding of what they tell
And then you
us.
kind of can breathe again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
for
go, oh,
sure.
I was making a fuss. They didn't like my cake. It was just the icing,
That's it.
whatever it is.
You know what? And it's really good you talk about this because I am a person that tries not to complain. Like I try to look at different ways at looking at things because I just don't feel like putting something negative out into a space is healthy. And this is just me, right? So I'll look at something, I'll understand it for myself if it's upset me. And then when I go to speak to someone where I just need to let it off my chest, I will make sure that I'm very factual about the situation and I'm not adding any negative connotations into it. Because after that happens, I want to kind of just, what's done is done.
And absolutely.
And that's
And
just
that,
how I do it though.
that and a lot of people have that strategy. They'll focus on the positives. They'll try not to speak ill of other people or the world, and they'll stick to the facts. And not everyone has the ability to do that. But even if we are talking to someone who is, and I'm sure we've all got someone in our life that calls us up and we go, here we go,
Totally.
moaning Minnie. They're on the phone. I better get myself a drink because they're going to be half an hour. And they sit there and they moan, and all the world things, it's all the things that are happening to them, and they almost go into a victim space. I, I normally say to those people now, you've told me all about the challenge you face. Thank you so much. It sounds like you're going through a few tough issues. But now tell me three things you're grateful for. Tell me three things that you can be glad about in your life.
To reset their
To
mindset.
reset, to focus on the positives as
I love
well as
that.
the
I love
negatives.
that.
You might have heard of that book, Pollyanna. An American author wrote a book, the whole series of
Yes,
books,
yes, yes, yes.
50s or 60s, sort of written. Pollyanna, she was glad about everything. That gladness that that's a really cool message in that book. Being glad about what you can be glad about and accepting that life isn't always a bed of roses, but when you've got a thorn, you can deal with it, you pull it out, and you dispose of it.
And that's exactly my point that I was trying to say is that as hard as things may be, always try to look at it at a point of view that it can be fixed and that you don't have to continue talking about it because I feel if you put a lot of energy into something that has no value, it really will just repeat itself or come back.
And negative
You
energy is
know,
exhausting.
100%.
And that's another reason why focusing on what we can change or what we have control over, rather than wasting energy getting upset about things we can't control. And a lot of people like to do that. It's part of our
Of
mindset
course.
as well. It's people love to moan about the weather. But can we change the weather? Not at all.
No,
We've just got to live with it.
that's it.
So when we moan about other things, can we live with it? Can we change it? No. Let's treat it like the weather.
And that's it. And I guess, if I can do that, absolutely someone else could do that,
Absolutely.
and it's always finding the goodness in something.
And how often do we say to someone or we moan to someone, oh, it's raining a lot today? And they'll say, well, it's good for the garden.
You know what? It's actually funny you say that, because I used to say, oh, this weather is terrible. And my mum would turn around and be like, no, it's not. Rain is good. It gives us nourishment. And so now I never say the weather is bad. And when I look at something, I like whatever the weather is, I'm always grateful. And that's from hearing my mum just like point out, no, let's be grateful that we have another day to
Absolutely.
appreciate.
And we've only got to look around the world to see that we're in a good shape.
We're in a great shape.
We're in great shape here
We're
in
in a
New
really
Zealand.
great shape.
Yes, it's expensive, but then are we buying things because we need them or want them?
Correct. And are we? And there are ways to buy things. You don't always have to buy like waddies. Like there is a solution. There's PAMs. Like
Well,
we're so
it's
very lucky that we have
we have
solutions. We
choices
have a
when we go to the
choice.
supermarket. We don't
Correct.
just have one
Correct.
vegetable available.
Correct. And
Um,
that's it. And so you make it work,
yeah,
because eventually things will start to get better, and you will be able to get the favorite thing that you like to eat or so forth. You've just got to keep
yeah.
pushing
How
through.
often are we buying things to impress other people?
Giving back to others, being of service to
Um,
others.
there's lots of little things. Giving our own time to someone else, just a listening ear.
Well, I used to work for a rest home
Well, then you
when
were
I was
good at listening.
15, right? And I used to just talk with the elderly while I was feeding their dinner.
Yeah.
And it used to break my heart because they never had anyone come visit them. So I always made sure after school that I was really prepared, and would always get excited to give them all this energy.
Well, you were a granddaughter that a lot of them might not have even seen their own or heard
Totally.
their
So they
own.
just love to just sit and have
Yeah,
conversations with me. And we can do those kind of things for free.
yeah.
Those are the kind of things that you can do.
Talking to people in the supermarket, not
Yeah.
random strangers particularly, but even the person behind the counter. Hey, thanks. How's your weekend going? Thanks to work. Thanks for working today so that I can
I do that all the
buy that.
time.
I made a real effort during COVID of acknowledging people that I was interacting with at the shop, or because they'd putting themselves on the front line essentially.
Well, because, we're supposed to be socializing with like at least three different people
Yeah,
on a
there's
weekly basis, just to keep the whole social
well, yeah,
outlook
those
of kind of connected to the world,
yeah.
really.
Yeah, I don't know
You
if you're
know?
aware, but research in the UK has shown that if people have less than 3 social contacts in one week, they're at 70% higher risk of developing depression.
See, I do listen, don't I, to stats and stuff, because I
Yeah,
heard that through. So it
yeah,
is good to talk to at least three people.
yeah. But that can be family, friends,
Well, it can be anything,
colleagues.
really,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I have a job that's very extroverted. I have to be quite an extrovert. And naturally, I'm probably an introverted extrovert. So when I'm not teaching or not working, or I'll often be quite independent and have a lot of solitude. But it's my way of balancing the very energetic work I have to
Well,
do or that
like,
I do.
because you are in the mental health industry, what are some of the things that you do for yourself, like outside of work?
So many different interests that I sort of float around like a
It's
social butterfly,
beautiful.
often quite independently. I might, I mean, if I look at this week, I mean, I was at the supermarket the other day and I thought, oh, I want some of that particular fish. So I bought it, cooked up a lovely big smoked fish pie,
Nice.
appreciated myself. I like to cook and I like to eat what I cook, and I like a particular, something nice. I might go for a drive out into the countryside. On Monday I had a day off, so I went out to Whatapu with a big
Beautiful.
roam on the beach and walk up on the hills. It was beautiful. Getting out in
The
nature and
nature.
just
Love
connecting with
nature.
nature,
Absolutely.
barefoot in the sand on the beach and paddling in the shore.
That sounds wonderful.
I've made some food today that I'm going to be taking to some friends
And he brought
later.
me some
Bought you
muffins,
some muffins.
which I'm super
Yeah,
excited to
I
get
was
into
going
after
to.
this.
I soon got in the kitchen, so I do things that I know will bring me pleasure, will bring me joy. I might learn something. I like to read a lot, much as possible, integrating it into everyday situations because I think it's great. I like the sound of it. It's very melodious and fluid. Um, I'll connect with friends, family. Um,
To just get out there and just
yeah,
do
or
things.
just
Or
do
like,
nothing and put Netflix on and find something I can binge and just completely relax. And it's allowing myself the range of different activities, going to the art gallery, the museum, going
beautiful.
whatever it might be. I like people watching. There's lots of different. I like gardening. I like lots of different things.
Which is great. You
Yeah,
guys just had a couple of ideas, a million ideas that just came through just then.
and most of us. I mean, it's part of what I don't know if you've heard of well-being. I'm sure you probably talk about
Yes.
it in your. I mean, the Te Whare Tapawa model of well-being. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Is a really great way of looking at how we can maintain good mental health by doing. We've got 5 elements that
So, what are those
contribute.
elements?
We have our taha hiranaro, our mental and emotional well-being. Um, so being kind to ourselves, allowing ourselves to have that fluctuation, just like in a physical health issue. We give ourselves a little bit of a space to all that sniffle, all that cough. But if it gets too bad, we go to the doctor.
Doctors
So it
to get it looked at.
fluctuates. Um, our taha wairua, our religion, whatever that might be, or our values and beliefs, and contribute to who we are and actively living to those values and beliefs.
Okay, I love that.
Um, our taha whānau, our social well-being, our family connections, our friend connections. And I like the fact that whānau includes everybody in our life that we
Yeah,
come into
even people
contact
that we
with.
call friends that are part of our family.
Absolutely, because for some people, their immediate
Absolutely.
family
I
might,
have a few of those where I've got some friends that I class as my family.
yeah, people you go to for advice, that social connection, they make you feel good about yourself. They give you that feeling of belonging. Um, our taha tinana, our physical activity,
So, like our
keeping our
bodies.
physical health in as best as condition we can. How many people do we know of that have gone through some kind of physical health challenge? Cancer, breaks. You can see how cancer is a great example. Someone's mental health declines because they're going through a tough
Absolutely.
journey. They come out the other side, the treatment's over, the relief that the treatment's been successful.
But that would drain you
It's
so
draining
much.
for people. But how often do we focus on, how's the chemo, how's the
We
treatment?
don't.
We talk about the physical
We talk about everything else
journey,
but
but
that.
not the mental.
The inner sides of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other element, of course, is the taha whenua, the connection we have to our land and environment around us. How many of us have created a home, no matter what we live in?
Yeah.
You hear that saying, people often say when they buy a house and they buy that house and it's an empty house, but they're going to create a home. And that's part of our whenua. But even when you consider the weather events we had in New Zealand, the East Cape, west coast of Auckland, people's land, their home, their castle almost were damaged by those floods. It affected their mental health. The land that they'd created, they'd worked on, they know how that land works for them.
Correct.
And we
I,
all have a sense
no,
of
you're right,
place.
because I was working for a company and our store had got flooded, so it was wiped out. But the whole community had come together and they had made food and stalls and see that's beautiful.
Yeah,
Coming together as one and working
absolutely.
together to make it better. It was beautiful.
There are so many people that are actively involved without any recognition and doing things for their community. The diversity of community activities and the range of people that are helping out in some way. I think because it's got bigger, it's become more of a rat race and people are less compassionate to others than they were previously and perhaps less community minded. They're less
That's
likely
so
to try and
sad.
interact with the community or engage with the community because of trust,
Yeah.
safety. COVID obviously sort of.
Do you feel like this is where tall poppy syndrome's coming?
Yes, I think the Kiwis are great at knocking down people who are doing very well. I'm saying that very generally
Yeah,
because
of
we're
course,
also
of
very great at
course.
boosting people. Our sports stars go right to the top of the food chain, as it were, and often those media stars or TV or personalities are very they fly in and out with the wind almost, and the respect people have. But I think there's a role models that we all have has the responsibility of a role model often gets overlooked by that individual. They might make some bad choices, or they might, we'll see media presentations of people who have taken drugs and ended up on the wrong side of the law or something like that. And we kind of are quick to make judgments
Yeah,
about
for
them.
sure.
But let's face it, they're human. They're allowed to make mistakes.
And
They're
that's
allowed to
it.
learn.
We're human. We're allowed to make mistakes.
And it's okay to make mistakes as long as you don't turn your back on it. Use it as a learning
Learn
opportunity.
from your mistakes because everything's a lesson, right?
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of younger people now, that fear of failure can often come into how our mental health can be affected. And for young people, the drive to succeed academically in some capacity in school, whether it's academically or other, sports or music or creatives, the people that just go in and participate and have a great time are often overlooked sometimes in that space. And actually, it's the effort that,
Absolutely. And you know what? Like, one thing I've learned through a lot of people that have become successful is that you will fail more than you will succeed.
yes,
And that's because your failures are the insight to being able to learn the lessons and persevere to the next step.
absolutely. And your failures don't have to define you.
Not at all.
Just like your mental health doesn't have to define you. You don't have to create a label. You don't have to label yourself or categorize yourself. I think often we're trying to strive to fit into some kind of category rather than going, actually, I am who I am. I have this because I have it. Keeping up with the Joneses is another example of that. How many people go off and buy a car because that's what everyone else is buying?
When they can't even afford that car, and then they put themselves
Absolutely,
in debt, and it just
absolutely.
goes on and on and on when you should
Are they
just
buying it because
like.
they like the car, because they think other people will think they're a better person because they've
I
got
feel like
that
a lot of the
vehicle?
time it is the better person syndrome of it all. But I like what you just said, and I think that's probably what we're going to sign off with is that we are who we are.
Be who you are and be your authentic self and be kind to yourself. No one else is going to be kind to you. You can't rely on other people or expect other people to be kind to us, whereas we can expect ourselves to be kind to
So, what were
us.
those things that you just said before we sign off? Be kind to
Be kind
yourself,
to yourself, value yourself,
value yourself.
and remember that you're not there to live up to other people's expectations. And similarly, they're not there to live up to yours. And if we don't have expectations, we don't get disappointed.
Good. So, just be who you are.
Yeah,
I love that. Wow. Thank you so much,
you're
Brian, for
very
coming in
welcome.
to sit down and have this
It's
conversation
a
around mental health and for us trying to have this conversation because, it is normal. Mental health is normal, guys. And it's something that should be spoken about. And if you see it happening, or in terms of if you see someone that's not feeling themselves, or there's someone that looks sad that's sitting down, ask them, are you okay? How is your day? Be that lending hand to someone that is needing someone there. And there are many places that you can find help. But one of the things that we have spoken about today is calling or texting 1737, where they have trained counselors that will be able to help in any way, that are there 24/7. But thank you again, Brian.
You're very
It's
welcome.
been an absolute pleasure to
And
be able
thank you for
to.
listening to me
No, I loved
and
it. I
hearing
think
me.
I think it's a beautiful thing that you're doing. Continue to keep doing what you do.
Yeah,
It's a blessing to all, right? Because it's something that us as human beings need. That we need people to listen, and we need people to understand that, when you're dealing with anything, when it comes to the mental health aspect of anything, that you are just as normal as anyone else. It's fine. there is absolutely nothing wrong with it,
Absolutely.
right? But like, I will be back next week on Sunday at 5 p.m. for another episode of I Am Me with AMP. But welcome back to 2024's first episode.
Kia ora.